In 2008, Meredith Collins, a 28-year-old software engineer from Seattle, decided to embark on a solo camping trip in Olympic National Park. An experienced hiker with multiple wilderness excursions under her belt, Meredith was well prepared with supplies, emergency equipment, and a detailed itinerary she had shared with her sister. What was supposed to be a rejuvenating 3-day retreat into nature would become a harrowing ordeal that Meredith would never forget. On her first day, Meredith hiked 6 miles to a remote campsite near the Hoh River. The area was known for its stunning old-growth rainforest, with moss-draped trees creating an ethereal primeval atmosphere. By late afternoon, she had set up her tent, prepared dinner on her portable stove, and settled in with a book as dusk began to fall. Just as darkness enveloped the forest, Meredith heard a twig snap. Initially dismissing it as wildlife, she continued reading. Then came another snap, followed by what sounded distinctly like footsteps moving around her campsite's perimeter. Meredith called out, thinking it might be another hiker, but received no response. The footsteps stopped. Unnerved but not yet alarmed, Meredith retired to her tent early, attributing the sounds to deer, or perhaps a small bear. She had secured her food in a bear canister away from her tent, following proper wilderness protocol. Sleep came fitfully as the forest's natural soundtrack of rustling leaves and distant rushing water was occasionally interrupted by what seemed like deliberate movement nearby. Around 2 a.m., Meredith awoke with a start. The beam of a flashlight was sweeping across her tent from the outside. Someone was there, circling her campsite. Heart pounding, she reached for her phone only to remember there was no service in this remote location. The light lingered on her tent wall for a moment before disappearing. Then came a voice, male, low, and unnervingly calm. "I know you're in there. I've been watching you." Meredith froze, her mind racing with horrifying possibilities. The voice continued, describing her car in the parking lot 6 miles away, mentioning her red backpack, even noting what she had eaten for dinner. Whoever this was had been observing her not just at the campsite, but throughout her journey. Thinking quickly, Meredith reached for her emergency whistle and blew it with all her might, producing a piercing shriek that echoed through the trees. She followed this by shouting that she had a weapon and had already radioed park rangers. Both lies, but she hoped they might deter her stalker. The strategy seemed to work momentarily. The presence retreated, footsteps hastily moving away from her tent. Meredith didn't dare leave her shelter. Instead, she gathered her essentials, headlamp, knife, water bottle, compass, and prepared for a possible escape. Sleep was out of the question now. For 2 agonizing hours, Meredith sat completely still, straining to detect any sounds above the thundering of her own heartbeat. Just as she began to think the danger had passed, she heard something new. The distinctive sound of a knife slicing through fabric. Someone was cutting into the back of her tent. In a surge of panic-fueled adrenaline, Meredith burst through the tent's front entrance, headlamp blazing, and ran blindly into the forest. Behind her, she heard angry shouting and crashing footsteps in pursuit. Running through the pitch-black woodland at night was perilous, but fear propelled her forward, ducking under branches and leaping over logs, her headlamp illuminating just enough ground ahead to prevent a catastrophic fall. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only minutes, Meredith spotted a massive fallen tree with a hollowed underside. She dove into the cavity, turned off her light, and made herself as small as possible. The sounds of pursuit continued, moving past her hiding place and gradually fading into the distance. For the remainder of that night, Meredith stayed hidden, shivering from both the cold and terror. When the first light of dawn finally broke through the canopy, She emerged cautiously and oriented herself with her compass. Rather than returning to her campsite to retrieve her gear, she headed straight for the main trail, intent on reaching the ranger station as quickly as possible. It took her nearly 4 hours of anxious hiking before she encountered a group of morning hikers who, seeing her disheveled state and hearing her story, immediately escorted her to the ranger station. Park authorities launched a search of the area, but found only Meredith's ransacked campsite. Her tent slashed open, belongings scattered, and disturbingly, some of her personal items missing, including photographs from her wallet. The identity of Meredith's nocturnal stalker was never discovered. Park rangers speculated it might have been a drifter, as several similar incidents had been reported in national parks across Washington and Oregon that year. The most unsettling detail came 3 weeks later when Meredith received an anonymous package at her Seattle apartment containing her missing driver's license, a chilling reminder that her stalker not only knew who she was, but also where she lived. Following the incident, Meredith became an advocate for wilderness safety, particularly for solo female hikers. She now conducts workshops on wilderness preparedness and emergency response, transforming her traumatic experience into potentially life-saving knowledge for others. The case remains in the unsolved files of the National Park Service, one of many mysterious incidents that occur in America's vast wilderness areas. For Meredith, the forest that once represented solace and adventure became a setting for a nightmare that has forever changed how she perceives the thin boundary between civilization and the wild, and the potentially dangerous strangers who move between those worlds. In January 2013, 4 experienced backcountry skiers, Thomas Reed, Caleb Winters, Rachel Donovan, and Mark Shepard, embarked on what was supposed to be a weekend winter camping expedition in the Adirondack High Peaks of upstate New York. All 4 were seasoned outdoors people with extensive winter survival training. Thomas, the group's de facto leader, had meticulously planned the expedition, selecting a remote route that would take them through some of the most pristine wilderness in the Northeast. The group set out on a clear Friday morning from the Adirondack LOG trailhead, skiing 5 miles to their first planned campsite. The weather forecast had predicted stable conditions, cold but manageable temperatures around 15 degrees Fahrenheit, with minimal wind. They made good time on the well-packed trail, reaching their destination by mid-afternoon, where they established camp in a sheltered clearing surrounded by towering white pines. After setting up their 4-season tents and preparing a hot dinner on their camp stoves, the group gathered around a small permitted fire to discuss the next day's route. It was during this conversation that Thomas first noticed something unusual, a faint metallic odor in the air that seemed out of place in the wilderness. When he mentioned it, the others initially dismissed it, attributing the smell to their cooking equipment or something burning in the fire. As darkness fell completely, temperatures dropped precipitously, plunging well below the forecasted range. The group retired to their tents earlier than planned, with agreements to check conditions at first light, before deciding whether to proceed deeper into the backcountry or return to the trailhead. Around 2 a.m., Rachel was awakened by what she described later as a deep vibrating hum that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. The strange sound was accompanied by a pulsing blue light filtering through the fabric of her tent. Thinking it might be another camper, or perhaps a park ranger with an emergency, she called out to her companions. Mark, in the adjacent tent, responded that he too had been awakened by the phenomenon. When they cautiously unzipped their tents, what they witnessed defied immediate explanation. Approximately 50 yards from their campsite, a blue-white light pulsed rhythmically among the trees. The snow around the light appeared to be melting in a perfect circle, despite the sub-zero temperatures. Most disturbing was the complete absence of sound from the forest. No wind in the branches, no distant owl calls, nothing but the strange humming vibration. Thomas, emerging from his tent with a camera, attempted to document the anomaly, but later reported that his digital camera malfunctioned completely when pointed at the light. Caleb, the most scientifically minded of the group, suggested it might be some atmospheric electrical phenomenon related to the extreme cold, though he admitted it didn't match any known pattern of St. Elmo's fire or other natural occurrences he was familiar with. For nearly 20 minutes, the four campers observed the pulsing light from what they deemed a safe distance. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the light intensified to an almost blinding degree before vanishing entirely. The natural sounds of the forest returned in an almost violent rush. Branches creaking, wind howling, and a distant crashing sound like trees falling. Badly unsettled, but reasoning that moving through unfamiliar terrain in darkness would be more dangerous than staying put, the group decided to remain at their campsite until daybreak. None of them slept. Instead, they consolidated into 2 tents for safety and maintained a watch rotation until morning. When dawn finally broke, they discovered something even more inexplicable. The area where the light had been observed was now a perfect circle of bare ground, approximately 30 feet in diameter. Despite overnight temperatures that had dropped to -10 degrees Fahrenheit, there was no snow within this circle, and more bizarrely, no ice. The ground was completely dry and unnaturally warm to the touch. Several mature pine trees that had stood within this circle were simply gone, not cut, not burned, but absent entirely, with no stumps or root systems visible in the exposed soil. Even more disquieting was what they found at the circle's precise center, their own topographic map that had been secured in Thomas's pack inside his tent, now laid open and marked with strange geometric symbols in a substance that appeared to be red clay, a material not naturally occurring in the Adirondack region. Thoroughly alarmed, the group hastily packed their gear and began skiing back toward the trailhead. It was during this retreat that they realized something else was wrong. Their compasses were spinning erratically, and GPS devices showed coordinates that kept shifting, placing them variously in Canada, Vermont, and even briefly in the middle of Lake Champlain. They were forced to navigate by the sun and their knowledge of the terrain. Approximately 2 miles into their journey out, all 4 members of the group began experiencing intense headaches and nosebleeds simultaneously. Rachel later described feeling as though my thoughts were being sifted through by something outside myself. Mark reported a persistent metallic taste in his mouth that he couldn't eliminate, despite drinking water and eating snow. When they finally reached the trailhead parking lot around noon, they discovered another unsettling detail. Though they had departed on Friday and spent only 1 night camping, the date was now Monday, according to their vehicle's dashboard clock and their previously powered-down phones, which had synchronized upon regaining service. Somehow, they had lost an entire day with no memory of where that time had gone. In the weeks following the incident, all 4 experienced similar symptoms: persistent insomnia, unexplained burns on their hands that appeared and disappeared, and most disturbing, simultaneous nightmares featuring identical imagery of geometric patterns and a sense of being observed by something they could not see but could feel watching them. Medical examinations revealed elevated radiation readings in their clothing and gear, though not at levels deemed immediately harmful. The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation conducted an investigation of the site based on GPS coordinates the group had recorded before their equipment malfunctioned. Officials reported finding a disturbance at the location, but declined to elaborate further. Soil samples taken from the area were sent to a research laboratory at Cornell University, where analysis reportedly showed unusual mineral compositions, not typical of the region. 6 months after the incident, Caleb Winters, who had been the most skeptical of supernatural explanations, disappeared while on a solo hiking trip in the same region of the Adirondacks. Despite extensive search efforts by forest rangers and volunteer teams, no trace of him was ever found beyond his vehicle parked at a trailhead and a single boot print leading into the woods. The remaining 3 survivors have declined most interview requests, but did participate in a documentary in 2018, where Thomas Reed stated, "There are phenomena in our wilderness areas that science hasn't categorized or explained. We encountered something that exists in the margins between known reality and something else entirely. I don't know what to call it, but I know what we experienced was real." The Frozen Pines incident, as it has come to be known in online forums dedicated to unexplained wilderness encounters, remains officially classified as an environmental anomaly of unknown origin in New York State Parks records. The specific campsite location, though not formally restricted, has reportedly been avoided by park rangers and local guides since the event, with one veteran Adirondack guide telling a regional newspaper, "Some places in these mountains don't want human visitors. That clearing is one of them." To this day, electronic equipment reportedly malfunctions in the vicinity of the incident site, and visitors to the broader area have documented compass irregularities and unexplained battery drainages. Whether the phenomenon was a rare natural event, military testing gone awry, or something beyond conventional explanation, remains a subject of debate among scientific researchers and paranormal investigators alike. In February 2009, what began as a meticulously planned winter mountaineering expedition in Washington's Cascade Range transformed into one of the most harrowing survival ordeals ever documented in American alpine wilderness. The incident, which came to be known as the Glacier Peak Avalanche Survival Case, would later be studied extensively by wilderness rescue organizations and mountaineering safety programs nationwide. A group of 7 experienced mountaineers, Daniel Harris, lead guide and expedition organizer, Emma Lawson, Christopher Park, Samantha Chen, brothers Robert and William Taylor, and Marcus Jensen, embarked on a challenging winter ascent of Glacier Peak, Washington's 4th highest mountain, at 10,541 feet. All were seasoned winter alpinists with extensive technical training, avalanche certification, and previous high-altitude experience. Several had summited more technically demanding peaks, including Mount Rainier, in winter conditions. The expedition was scheduled to last 6 days, 2 days for the approach to high camp at approximately 8,000 feet, 1 day for summit attempt, and 3 days for contingencies and descent. Their route, the Disappointment Peak Cleaver, was considered moderately difficult in summer, but significantly more challenging in winter conditions. The team had monitored weather forecasts closely for weeks, selecting a projected window of stable conditions for their summit attempt. The approach progressed according to plan. Weather conditions were cold but clear, with temperatures hovering around 10 C, and moderate wind speeds of 15 to 20 mph. Challenging, but within acceptable parameters for experienced winter mountaineers. Snow conditions appeared stable during their ascent, with the team performing periodic snow pit analyses that revealed no immediate signs of avalanche danger. On the evening of their second day, the group established their high camp on a relatively protected ledge below Disappointment Peak. Their camp consisted of 3 specialized 4-season tents engineered for extreme alpine conditions, set up in a triangular configuration, anchored directly to the mountain. After a detailed review of their summit plan over dinner, the team retired early in preparation for their 3 a.m. alpine start. At approximately 11:42 p.m., the mountain made the first move in what would become a life-or-death chess match between humans and nature. According to accounts later provided by survivors, the initial indication of danger was a distant rumbling that rapidly intensified, accompanied by what Emma Lawson described as the mountain itself shuddering beneath our sleeping bags. Within seconds, the team experienced what was later determined to be a remote-triggered slab avalanche, originating approximately 1,200 feet above their position. The massive snow displacement obliterated the upper slope of their planned route and generated a pressure wave that partially collapsed 2 of their 3 tents. No one was injured in this initial event, but the team immediately recognized their perilous situation. The route above had been rendered impassable, and the snow conditions had clearly destabilized. Daniel initiated emergency protocols, and the team began consolidating essential supplies in preparation for an immediate descent at first light. Nature, however, had eliminated that option. At 2:17 a.m., a second larger avalanche released from an adjacent slope. Samantha Chen, who had stepped outside to retrieve equipment from an external storage area, observed the massive wall of snow and ice bearing down on their position and managed to shout a warning seconds before impact. The force of the avalanche was catastrophic. 2 tents were completely swept away, while the third, containing Daniel, Emma, and Christopher, was partially protected by a rock outcropping. The other 4 team members, Samantha, who had given the warning, and Robert, William, and Marcus, who had been in the destroyed tents, were carried approximately 600 feet downslope. When the snow settled, the team had been effectively split into 2 groups, separated by a chaotic field of avalanche debris. The upper group immediately activated their avalanche beacons and began a desperate search for their companions. After 47 minutes of intensive probing and digging, they located and excavated Samantha, Robert, and William, all of whom had survived, but sustained significant injuries. Marcus Jensen, however, could not be located despite exhaustive searching. The situation assessment was grim. Robert had suffered compound fractures to both legs. William had signs of internal bleeding and a suspected spinal injury, and Samantha had a severe concussion and frostbitten extremities. Their primary satellite phone had been lost in the avalanche, while the backup unit indicated no signal due to their position in the steep-walled basin. With descent routes now obliterated by avalanche debris and unstable snow conditions persisting, the group faced an impossible dilemma: remain in an extremely dangerous location with critically injured team members, or attempt a high-risk evacuation over terrain that had already proven deadly. Daniel made the difficult decision to establish a sheltered position, utilizing their remaining tent and improvised snow caves, reasoning that initiating a rescue signal with their emergency beacon would be their best chance for survival. What the team didn't yet realize was that the second avalanche had damaged their emergency beacon, limiting its transmission effectiveness. As dawn broke, the true extent of their situation became apparent. The surrounding landscape had been drastically altered by the twin avalanches. Their planned descent route was now impassable due to near-vertical ice walls created by the snow displacement, and alternative routes would require technical climbing beyond the capabilities of the injured team members. The third day brought deteriorating weather conditions. A storm system not forecast in their pre-trip planning began moving through the area, bringing heavy snowfall, temperatures plummeting to 15 Fahrenheit, and wind speeds exceeding 50 mph. These conditions not only increased the avalanche danger further, but also rendered any potential helicopter rescue impossible. By the fourth day, the team's situation had become critical. Medical supplies were dwindling, with Robert and William requiring increasingly sophisticated care beyond what was available in their emergency kits. Food rations, originally planned for 6 days, were stretched thin due to the increased caloric needs of the injured and the energy demands of maintaining body temperature in extreme conditions. Daniel and Emma established a rotation system where one person would maintain a signal fire during daylight hours, while the others tended to the injured and reinforced their increasingly precarious shelter. The storm intensified through their 5th day on the mountain, with total snowfall accumulation exceeding 4 feet in 36 hours. On the morning of the 6th day, Christopher Park attempted a solo descent to seek help, carrying minimal equipment to maximize speed. He navigated approximately 2 miles down the mountain before encountering a technical section that proved impassable without proper equipment. Forced to turn back, he became disoriented in whiteout conditions and spent 14 hours lost on the mountain before miraculously finding his way back to the group's position, suffering moderate frostbite to his extremities. By the 7th day, the situation had become dire. William's condition had deteriorated significantly, with clear signs of internal hemorrhaging. The remaining team members were showing early symptoms of hypothermia, despite their technical gear, and their shelter had been partially compromised by the continuing storm. It was at this lowest point that Daniel made an astonishing discovery while attempting to repair their damaged emergency beacon. The avalanche that had swept away their companions had also deposited equipment from other mountaineering expeditions conducted in previous years. Among the debris, Daniel found a specialized high-frequency radio used by technical climbing teams, different from their standard emergency equipment. Though damaged, its specialized frequency band was still operational. That evening, Daniel established contact with a private Forestry Service radio operator, approximately 30 miles from their position. The connection was tenuous and frequently interrupted, but sufficient to communicate their dire circumstances and approximate location. The Forestry Service relayed their situation to emergency services, initiating what would become one of the most challenging alpine rescues in Washington state history. The rescue operation faced extraordinary obstacles. Continuing storm conditions prevented helicopter approaches, while the extreme avalanche danger made ground-based rescue attempts nearly suicidal. For 3 additional days, the stranded mountaineers fought to keep William alive while maintaining their increasingly fragile shelter against the relentless storm. On the morning of the 10th day, a brief break in the weather enabled a specialized high-altitude rescue helicopter from Naval Air Station Whidbey Island to approach their position. Unable to land due to terrain constraints, the rescue team deployed a pararescue specialist via hoist, who coordinated the evacuation of the injured climbers first, followed by the remaining team members. The survival of 6 of the 7 mountaineers was later described by rescue authorities as nothing short of miraculous. The accumulated challenges they faced, 2 major avalanches, a sustained Category 2 storm, critical injuries, damaged communication equipment, and dwindling supplies, represented a convergence of catastrophic factors that would typically prove fatal. The medical examiner later determined that Marcus Jensen had died almost instantly from traumatic injuries sustained during the initial avalanche impact. His body was recovered approximately 3 weeks later, when conditions allowed for a safe recovery operation. William Taylor required extensive surgeries for his internal injuries, but eventually made a full recovery. Robert's compound fractures required surgical intervention and nearly a year of rehabilitation. In the months following their rescue, multiple safety investigations examined the incident in detail. The analyses concluded that the team had followed appropriate protocols in their planning and execution, and that the avalanches they experienced were of a magnitude and character that could not have been reasonably predicted based on the information available to them. The remote-triggered nature of the first avalanche, where stability failure occurred at a considerable distance from the triggering point, represented a particularly insidious danger that even experienced mountaineers might not detect through standard assessment methods. The Glacier Peak incident prompted several significant changes in winter mountaineering practices, including revised protocols for campsite selection in avalanche terrain, enhanced redundancy requirements for emergency communication devices, and the development of more sophisticated avalanche prediction models that better account for remote triggering phenomena. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of the incident was captured in Emma Lawson's journal, recovered intact despite the ordeal. Her final entry, written on their 9th day on the mountain, reads, "What terrifies me most is not the mountain's power to kill, that I've always respected. It's the realization that survival out here isn't just about skill or preparation, or even teamwork, though we would have perished days ago without those. It's about the razor-thin margins between catastrophic bad luck and miraculous good fortune, and the humbling truth that sometimes the difference between the two comes down to finding a broken radio in the snow that shouldn't have been there at all." Today, a small memorial plaque for Marcus Jensen stands at the Glacier Peak trailhead. It bears a simple inscription that has become something of a mantra among winter alpinists in the Cascades. "The mountain decides. Prepare accordingly." In April 2016, 5 friends from Austin, Texas, Jason Martinez, Eliza Chen, Derek Watkins, Marissa Rodriguez, and Trevor Miller, embarked on a 3-day canoe and camping trip along the remote Devil's River in southwestern Texas. The river, despite its ominous name, is renowned for its pristine beauty, crystal clear waters, and challenging rapids, making it a destination for experienced paddlers seeking wilderness adventure away from civilization. The Devil's River flows through one of the most isolated regions of Texas, cutting through limestone canyons and rugged terrain where cell service is non-existent and encounters with other humans are rare. The group had secured the necessary permits and had meticulously planned their journey, intending to paddle approximately 25 miles from Baker's Crossing to the Dolan Falls Preserve. All 5 were experienced outdoors enthusiasts in their early 30s. Jason, who organized the trip, had navigated the Devil's River twice before and was familiar with its challenges. The others were competent paddlers who had completed several multi-day river excursions throughout Texas and the Southwest. They carried appropriate safety equipment, emergency communications devices, and sufficient supplies for their planned itinerary, plus 2 additional days in case of unexpected delays. The expedition began without incident. The group launched their 3 canoes, Jason and Eliza sharing one, Derek and Marissa in another, and Trevor solo in a smaller craft, early on a Thursday morning. Weather conditions were optimal, sunny with moderate temperatures and water levels that were slightly higher than average due to recent rainfall, but not dangerously so. According to the detailed trip log, later recovered from Jason's weatherproof notebook, the first day progressed smoothly. The group navigated several Class 2 rapids successfully and made camp at a designated site approximately 9 miles downstream from their starting point. Jason's notes described excellent morale among the group and mentioned only minor issues with equipment. A small tear in Trevor's tent that was repaired with duct tape, and a fishing rod that broke when Derek accidentally stepped on it. The trouble began on the second day. Jason's log entry, time-stamped at 10:17 a.m., noted that they had encountered a local rancher on horseback who warned them about unusual activity downstream. The rancher, whose name was recorded as Henry Blackwell, reportedly told the group that he had lost several cattle under strange circumstances near the river in recent weeks and advised them to consider cutting their trip short. The group discussed the warning, but ultimately decided to continue, reasoning that predator activity, likely mountain lions, was a normal part of the wilderness ecosystem. By midday, Jason recorded that the group had begun noticing peculiar details along the riverbanks. Several game trails that abruptly ended at the water's edge, trees with bark stripped in geometrically precise patterns, and most disconcertingly, the complete absence of bird sounds in an area that should have been teeming with riparian wildlife. The final entry in Jason's log, made at approximately 6:30 p.m. on the second day, described their arrival at a non-designated campsite in a small canyon. The planned site had been inaccessible due to recent erosion, forcing them to improvise. Jason noted the coordinates and described the location as eerily quiet but defensible. He mentioned that Trevor had discovered what appeared to be unusual track marks in the soft mud near their campsite. Not animal, not human, unlike anything any of us has seen before. The entry concluded with a plan to investigate a strange rock formation that Marissa had spotted on a ridge overlooking their camp after they finished setting up their tents. Jason wrote that the formation doesn't look natural, perfect hexagonal arrangement approx, 30 feet in diameter, visible only from certain angles. This was the last confirmed communication from the group. When they failed to arrive at their designated takeout point 2 days later, where Trevor's sister was waiting to pick them up, search and rescue operations commenced immediately. Texas Parks and Wildlife Department rangers, assisted by volunteer search teams and a helicopter from the State Department of Public Safety, conducted an extensive search of the river corridor and surrounding terrain. 3 days into the search operation, authorities discovered the group's campsite. What they found presented a disturbing and inexplicable scenario. All 5 tents were still erected, with sleeping bags and personal belongings inside, apparently undisturbed. A meal had been prepared, but not consumed. A pot of pasta still sitting on the now cold camp stove. Headlamps were arranged in a perfect circle in the center of the camp, all switched on and pointing inward, their batteries long dead. The 3 canoes were properly secured at the riverbank. All 5 life jackets were placed in a neat row nearby. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no evidence of animal predation or violent weather. The 5 campers had simply vanished without taking any of their equipment or supplies. The only potential clue was found inside Jason's tent. His logbook opened to a blank page with a single unfinished sentence written in handwriting, described by investigators as unusually shaky compared to previous entries. It read only, "They're coming from thee." Over the subsequent weeks, the search expanded to cover a 5-mile radius from the campsite. Tracking dogs were brought in, but reportedly exhibited unusual behavior, whining and refusing to follow trails that seemed to lead toward the ridge, where the rock formation had supposedly been spotted. No formation matching the description in Jason's log was ever located by search teams. One of the more bizarre aspects of the case emerged when investigators attempted to interview Henry Blackwell, the rancher mentioned in Jason's log. County records confirmed that a Henry Blackwell had indeed owned a ranch bordering the Devil's River, but he had died in 1998, nearly 18 years before the group's expedition. No current ranchers in the area matched the description recorded by Jason. The investigation took another unsettling turn when analysis of soil samples from the campsite revealed traces of an unidentified fungal spore not previously documented in the region. Mycologists from Texas A&M University, who examined the samples, noted that the spore structure bore similarities to certain hallucinogenic fungi, but belonged to no known genus. Environmental authorities subsequently conducted additional testing, but never publicly released the results. 6 months after the disappearance, Trevor Miller's digital camera was discovered by hikers nearly 20 miles from the campsite, wedged in a rock crevice. The memory card contained photos from the first day and a half of the trip, showing the group in high spirits, navigating the river. The final 3 images, however, have become the subject of intense scrutiny and debate among both investigators and online forums dedicated to unsolved mysteries. The antepenultimate photo showed the group's campsite at dusk, with a strange illumination visible on the ridge in the background, a series of dim, organized lights that formed no recognizable pattern. The penultimate image, taken in almost complete darkness, captured what appeared to be a tall, upright figure at the edge of the campsite, though detailed features were obscured by shadow and motion blur. The timestamp indicated this photo was taken at 11:42 p.m. The final image, timestamped just 2 minutes later, was completely black, except for what analysts have described as a constellation of pinpoint white lights arranged in a geometric pattern. Image enhancement techniques revealed no additional details. In the years since the group's disappearance, numerous theories have emerged. Some local residents point to the region's history of unexplained phenomena, including dozens of documented cases of missing livestock and occasional reports of unusual lights in the night sky. Others suggest more mundane explanations: a flash flood in an unmarked side canyon, an encounter with illegal activity in the remote borderlands, or even a carefully orchestrated disappearance by the group themselves. Law enforcement officials have consistently stated that the case remains open, but have disclosed few details beyond the initial findings. The families of the missing campers established a substantial reward fund for information, which remains unclaimed. Perhaps most disturbing is the account from the search and rescue team member who first discovered the abandoned campsite. In an interview granted to a local newspaper on condition of anonymity, he described experiencing a profound sense of being watched while at the site, and reported that his digital watch stopped functioning precisely at 11:44 p.m., the exact time of the final photo on Trevor's camera, only to resume normal operation when he left the canyon. I've worked search and rescue in some of the most remote wilderness areas across this country for over 20 years, he stated. I've seen the aftermath of bear attacks, flash floods, and people who simply got lost and succumbed to the elements. This was different. Whatever happened at that campsite on the Devil's River, it wasn't anything natural. Those people didn't just wander off. Something happened that night that doesn't fit any explanation I'm comfortable accepting. The Texas Parks and Wildlife Department now requires all Devil's River paddlers to carry satellite communication devices and to register all overnight campsites in advance. A permanent marker has been placed at the canyon where the group disappeared, not as a memorial, but as a warning. Camping prohibited in this area by order of Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. Local river guides who pass the site report that even on the hottest summer days, the canyon feels unnaturally cold. Wildlife remains notably absent from the immediate vicinity. To this day, not a single additional trace of Jason, Eliza, Derek, Marissa, or Trevor has ever been found, making the Devil's River disappearance one of the most perplexing unsolved mysteries in the annals of American wilderness exploration. In the summer of 2011, The scenic Blackwater Creek Wilderness area in northern Minnesota became the setting for one of the most disturbing cases of predatory stalking ever documented in the U.S. National Park System. What began as a week-long backcountry hiking and camping trip for 6 graduate students from the University of Wisconsin-Madison would evolve into a harrowing ordeal that would later be analyzed in law enforcement training programs across the country. The group consisted of 3 men and 3 women, all studying environmental science. Michael Lander, the unofficial leader who had organized the trip, his girlfriend, Sophia Chen, Aaron Davis, an experienced backpacker, Rebecca Torres, who was completing research on northern forest ecosystems, and married couple James and Catherine Wilson. All 6 were physically fit, knowledgeable about wilderness survival, and had participated in multiple extended backcountry excursions together over the previous 3 years. Their planned route was a challenging 52-mile loop through dense forest, following established but remote trails that typically saw minimal traffic, especially during weekdays. The group had meticulously prepared, obtaining all necessary permits and leaving a detailed itinerary with park authorities and family members. They carried top-quality equipment, satellite phones for emergencies, and even a small firearm. Aaron had a permit for a 9mm handgun as protection against potential wildlife encounters, particularly wolves and bears that populated the region. The first 2 days progressed without incident. The weather was ideal, and the group maintained good spirits as they covered approximately 18 miles of terrain, camping at designated backcountry sites. On the morning of the 3rd day, however, subtle indications began to suggest they were not alone in this remote wilderness. According to the detailed account later provided to authorities, Michael was the first to notice anomalies. While filtering water from a stream approximately 50 yards from their campsite, he observed what appeared to be fresh boot prints in the soft mud of the opposite bank, prints that seemed to follow the same direction the group had been traveling. When he pointed these out to Aaron, they agreed the tracks were concerning, but could potentially belong to another hiker on the same route. Later that afternoon, as the group navigated a particularly dense section of forest, Catherine reported hearing rhythmic sounds that seemed to mirror their hiking pace, but originated from somewhere in the surrounding woods. The sounds ceased whenever the group stopped to rest, only resuming when they continued walking. James suggested it might be an echo effect caused by the dense tree cover, though no one seemed entirely convinced by this explanation. That evening, while establishing their 3rd campsite in a small clearing, Rebecca discovered something profoundly unsettling: a cairn of stacked stones with their 6 hiking bandanas arranged on top, items that had been secured inside their packs or worn on their persons that morning. The discovery sent a wave of alarm through the group. Someone had not only been through their belongings during a brief period when they had left their packs unattended while scouting the area, but had deliberately created this display as a message. The group conducted a thorough inventory of their supplies, but found nothing else missing. After serious discussion about whether to abort the trip, they decided to continue, but with heightened precautions. No one would be alone at any time. Watches would be maintained throughout the night, and they would use the satellite phone to alert park rangers about the suspicious activity. The call to rangers, however, yielded little immediate assistance. Due to the group's remote location, the nearest ranger explained that it would take at least a day and a half for anyone to reach them. The ranger advised them to proceed to the nearest ranger station if they felt threatened, approximately 17 miles northeast of their position. That night, the group arranged their tents in a tight circle and maintained 2-person watches in 4-hour shifts. Around 2:30 a.m., during Sophia and Aaron's watch, they observed a flashlight beam moving methodically through the forest approximately 200 yards from camp. Aaron discharged a warning shot from his handgun into the air, and the light immediately extinguished. For the remainder of the night, no further activity was detected. The next morning, the group made the unanimous decision to abandon their planned route and make directly for the ranger station. They packed efficiently and began hiking at first light. The weather had deteriorated overnight, with a heavy mist reducing visibility and an intermittent drizzle, making the trail slippery and treacherous. It was mid-afternoon when the group realized they were being herded. Twice they encountered trees freshly felled across their path, forcing them to detour into increasingly dense and unfamiliar terrain. When consulting their topographical maps and GPS devices, they discovered they were being diverted southward, away from the ranger station. That evening, unable to reach their intended destination before nightfall, the group was forced to establish camp in a less than ideal location, a small depression surrounded by thick underbrush that offered concealment but limited visibility outward. During setup, James discovered a handheld two-way radio, partially buried near the site, its presence suggesting their pursuer had used this location previously and implicating a level of premeditation that heightened their alarm considerably. The fourth night brought the most disturbing escalation. Around midnight, during Michael and Rebecca's watch, a series of photographs printed on weatherproof paper were discovered placed on a log just within the perimeter of their campsite. Pictures of the group members taken at various points during their trip, including images of them sleeping from the previous nights. The photographs had been taken from various hidden vantage points, some from extremely close range, demonstrating that their stalker had approached within feet of them while they slept, despite their precautions. The discovery eliminated any remaining doubt. They were being hunted by someone with resources, patience, and deeply unsettling intentions. Aaron attempted to use the discovered radio to contact potential accomplices of their stalker, but received only static interspersed with what sounded like rhythmic breathing. The group spent the remainder of the night in a state of high alert, with all six awake and armed with various improvised weapons, in addition to Aaron's handgun. At first light, they abandoned most of their non-essential gear to increase mobility and began moving as rapidly as possible toward the ranger station, no longer following trails, but navigating cross-country in the most direct route possible. It was approximately 4 hours into this desperate march when Catherine spotted something that froze the blood of every group member: a tree with 6 sets of climbing harnesses and helmets hanging from its branches. Equipment identical to the set they had shipped to a future destination for the rock climbing portion of their trip, planned for the following week. This was gear that should have been securely stored at a facility over 100 miles away. The implication was clear and terrifying. Their stalker had not selected them at random, but had specifically targeted them with advanced knowledge of their expedition and extensive preparations. This revelation triggered the group's most decisive action, splitting into 3 pairs and moving in different directions, with plans to reconvene at a predetermined location, reasoning that their pursuer couldn't follow all 3 groups simultaneously. This strategy proved partially successful. 4 hours later, Michael and Sophia, having navigated largely uphill terrain to reach higher ground for better satellite phone reception, successfully contacted park authorities with sufficient details to prompt an immediate emergency response. James and Catherine reached a seldom-used fire road where they encountered a logging crew who transported them to the nearest ranger station. Aaron and Rebecca, however, experienced the most harrowing encounter. According to their subsequent report, while traversing a densely wooded ravine, they discovered a carefully concealed hunting blind equipped with high-end surveillance equipment, including a directional microphone, night vision scope, and a laptop containing hundreds of images of not only their group, but other hikers who had passed through the region in previous months. While examining these materials, they heard someone approaching rapidly through the forest and fled, leaving behind Aaron's backpack containing the handgun. By nightfall, all 6 members of the group had been located and evacuated from the wilderness area. A multi-agency manhunt ensued, involving park rangers, local law enforcement, FBI agents, and tracking dogs. The hunting blind was documented extensively, yielding substantial forensic evidence, including fingerprints, hair samples, and distinctive boot impressions matching those observed earlier by the group. The investigation took an unexpected turn 2 days later when authorities apprehended a suspect, Carlton Mercer, a 42-year-old former backcountry guide who had been dismissed from his position with the Park Service 3 years earlier due to inappropriate behavior toward female hikers. A search of Mercer's remote cabin, located just outside park boundaries, revealed an extensive collection of items stolen from hikers over a multi-year period, detailed journals describing his stalking techniques, and most disturbing, elaborate plans for capturing and transporting potential victims. Mercer had developed a meticulously structured operation. He would identify target groups through online hiking forums and social media posts, gathering extensive intelligence before they even entered the wilderness. Using his intimate knowledge of the park's terrain, he would subtly manipulate groups' movements through strategically placed obstacles and misleading trail markings, isolating them in predetermined areas where escape routes were limited. His ultimate objective, according to recovered documentation, was to eventually capture a female hiker by separating her from her group, utilizing the confusion and panic his psychological warfare techniques induced. During interrogation, Mercer revealed perhaps the most chilling aspect of his operation. In the 3 years since his dismissal, he had stalked over 20 different hiking groups in the region, gradually refining his methods. The 6 Wisconsin students had been the first group to detect his presence so early in the process and respond with sufficient organization and resistance to prompt him to accelerate his typical timeline. Mercer was subsequently convicted on multiple charges, including stalking, harassment, illegal surveillance, theft, and attempted kidnapping. He is currently serving a 27-year sentence in a federal penitentiary. The case prompted a comprehensive review of security protocols in remote wilderness areas nationwide and led to the implementation of enhanced monitoring systems for backcountry permits that flag individuals with concerning backgrounds. For the 6 students, the psychological impact of the ordeal was profound and enduring. While all completed their graduate studies, several developed post-traumatic stress symptoms that required extensive therapy. Catherine Wilson, who later became a park ranger herself, has been instrumental in developing wilderness safety guidelines and conducts regular workshops on situational awareness for backcountry hikers. The Blackwater Creek case stands as a sobering reminder that not all wilderness dangers come from natural sources or wildlife. As Rebecca Torres noted in a presentation to a collegiate outdoor club years after the incident, we prepared extensively for environmental hazards, equipment failures, and wildlife encounters. What we failed to consider was that the most dangerous predator in any wilderness is potentially human. Today, the Blackwater Creek Wilderness Area remains a popular destination for experienced backcountry enthusiasts. Visitors are still required to register their itineraries and check in upon completion of their journeys. Park literature now includes a section on human safety hazards, alongside its warnings about wildlife and environmental conditions, a direct legacy of the 6 students who survived one of the most meticulously orchestrated stalking cases in national park history. In late September 2015, the pristine wilderness surrounding Twin Lakes in Colorado's San Isabel National Forest became the setting for one of the most peculiar and unsettling incidents ever recorded in the state's camping history. The events that transpired during a 3-day period would later confound law enforcement, wildlife experts, and psychological researchers alike. The principal witnesses were members of the Caldwell family: Richard, 42, a civil engineer; his wife Diane, 40, a high school biology teacher; and their children Ethan, 16, and Melissa, 14. The Caldwells were experienced outdoor enthusiasts who had been camping in Colorado's backcountry for over a decade. They had specifically selected Twin Lakes for their annual fall trip due to its spectacular autumn foliage and relative seclusion compared to more popular destinations. The family arrived at the Twin Lakes campground on Friday afternoon, securing a site approximately 300 yards from the nearest occupied campsite. Weather conditions were ideal: clear skies with daytime temperatures in the low 60s and nights dropping to the upper 30s. Their setup was comprehensive: a 6-person tent, a separate cooking shelter, and standard camping amenities. Richard had also brought fishing equipment, as Twin Lakes was known for excellent trout fishing. The first signs of something amiss occurred shortly after sunset on their first evening. While preparing dinner, Diane noticed an unusual silence had descended upon the forest. The typical ambient sounds of wildlife, birds, insects, small mammals, had completely ceased. Richard attributed this to a possible predator in the vicinity, perhaps a mountain lion passing through the area, and suggested they maintain awareness but not be overly concerned. Later that night, around 11:30 p.m., the family was awakened by what Richard later described as a sound like nothing I've ever heard, somewhere between a deep hum and a resonant vibration. The sound persisted for approximately 3 minutes before abruptly stopping. The family initially attributed this to some distant machinery, perhaps from the nearby abandoned mining operations, though Richard noted it seemed to come from multiple directions simultaneously. The following morning revealed the first truly disturbing discovery. While collecting water from the nearby stream, Ethan found 3 separate piles of stones, arranged in perfect equilateral triangles, at precise 10-yard intervals along the stream bank. Each pile consisted of exactly 7 stones of nearly identical size and coloration. When the family investigated further, they found additional stone arrangements extending into the forest in a straight line, maintaining the exact 10-yard spacing. Richard, applying his engineering background, noted that the stone arrangements aligned perfectly with their campsite. Diane suggested they might be trail markers placed by forest rangers or another hiking group, though she acknowledged the precision and uniformity seemed unusual. As a precaution, the family photographed the arrangements and noted their GPS coordinates. Their second day proceeded without incident until late afternoon, when Melissa, while sketching in her nature journal near the lake shore, observed what she initially thought was a person standing motionless among distant trees across the lake. Using binoculars, the family observed what appeared to be a tall, thin figure, completely still at the forest edge. After watching for nearly 20 minutes with no movement detected, Richard decided to investigate, taking the family's motorized boat across the lake. Upon reaching the opposite shore, Richard found no evidence of anyone having been present. No footprints in the soft soil, no disturbed vegetation. What he did discover, however, was another triangular stone arrangement, larger than those found earlier, with an unusual addition. At the center lay a perfectly preserved deer skull, its antlers removed and eye sockets packed with a mixture of lake clay and what appeared to be crushed herbs. Increasingly uneasy but reluctant to abandon their trip, The family returned to their campsite and debated their options. They ultimately decided to remain, but implemented additional security measures, maintaining a constant watch rotation throughout the night, keeping their vehicle keys accessible, and sleeping fully clothed in case a rapid departure became necessary. The second night brought escalation. At precisely 11:30 p.m., verified by multiple watches, the humming sound returned, noticeably louder and accompanied by what Ethan described as pulses of pressure that could be physically felt. The family observed that battery-powered devices in their campsite, flashlights, phones, lanterns, began to flicker synchronously with these pulses. After approximately 5 minutes, the phenomenon ceased, but was immediately followed by intense activity in the surrounding forest. Cracking branches, rustling vegetation, and rapid movement that seemed to circle their entire campsite. Richard activated powerful floodlights mounted on their vehicle, illuminating the campsite perimeter, but nothing was visible in the tree line. The family remained on high alert, clustered together near their vehicle. Around 1 a.m., Melissa pointed out something profoundly unsettling. Despite the clear night and minimal light pollution, the stars directly above their campsite appeared to be obscured by what looked like a perfectly circular absence in the night sky. By morning, the family had unanimously decided to terminate their trip early. While packing their equipment, they discovered the most disturbing evidence yet: a complete circle of the triangular stone arrangements surrounding their entire campsite, placed with such stealth during the night that no family member had observed their creation, despite maintaining watches. At the precise center of their campsite, where their main tent had been pitched, they found a crude drawing pressed into the soil, geometric patterns surrounding what appeared to be a rudimentary representation of their family, with 4 figures arranged in the same positions they had maintained during their nighttime vigil. The Caldwells departed immediately, stopping at the ranger station to report their experiences. The attending ranger, Michael Torres, noted that the family appeared genuinely shaken. He accompanied them back to the campsite to investigate, but found the stone arrangements mysteriously absent. The soil drawing, however, remained visible, though Torres noted it appeared more weathered than should be possible in just a couple of hours. The incident might have been dismissed as an elaborate prank or a case of shared anxiety, except for 3 crucial factors that elevated it to something far more puzzling. First, subsequent soil analysis from the campsite revealed significant electromagnetic abnormalities and trace elements not typically found in the region. Second, the family's photographs of the stone arrangements showed clear evidence of precise geometric positioning that wildlife biologists confirmed would be impossible to create naturally. Finally, 2 other camping groups in widely separated areas of the same forest reported strikingly similar experiences during the exact same 3-day period, including the mysterious humming, stone arrangements, and circular star obscurations. State authorities launched a discreet investigation, initially suspecting coordinated harassment or perhaps illegal activity in the national forest. Wildlife cameras were installed throughout the area, and increased ranger patrols were implemented. For 3 weeks, no abnormal activity was detected. Then, on the night of October 21st, nearly a month after the Caldwell incident, all wildlife cameras simultaneously malfunctioned between 11:30 p.m. and 11:35 p.m. When technicians recovered the equipment, each camera's memory card contained the same final image before failure: a triangular arrangement of stones illuminated by the camera's infrared flash. The Twin Lakes incident remains officially classified as unexplained in Forest Service records. Psychological experts who interviewed the Caldwell family and other witnesses found no evidence of fabrication, hallucination, or suggestion. The family's detailed documentation, including photographs, recordings of the strange humming, and soil samples, provided compelling physical evidence that something truly anomalous had occurred. Alternative explanations have ranged from elaborate territorial markings by an unknown survivalist group to geological phenomena, causing localized electromagnetic disturbances that affected both electronics and human perception. Some researchers have proposed that the stone arrangements represented some form of experimental field communication system, though this fails to explain the precision placement overnight without detection. Richard Caldwell, whose engineering background made him particularly credible as a witness, summarized their experience in a later interview. Whatever happened at Twin Lakes wasn't random or natural. There was intelligence behind it, a methodical quality to everything we experienced. The precision, the timing, the symmetry. It was as if something was constructing a controlled environment around us, studying our reactions. The most unsettling part wasn't fear for our physical safety, but the sense that we were being systematically observed by something that operated according to patterns and logic we couldn't comprehend. The Caldwell family did eventually return to camping, though they now travel in larger groups and avoid particularly remote locations. Twin Lakes remains a popular destination for outdoor recreation, though rangers have noted a curious pattern. The specific campsite where the Caldwell incident occurred, despite its prime location and views, is almost invariably the last site to be occupied, even during peak season, when all other spots are filled. Perhaps most intriguing is the unexplained phenomenon reported by several subsequent campers who have used the site. Battery-powered devices that inexplicably activate at precisely 11:30 p.m., even when switched off, operating for exactly 5 minutes before returning to their previous state. In July 2013, Lake Lanier in northern Georgia became the setting for one of the most disturbing series of events ever documented in the state's recreational areas. What began as a standard weekend camping excursion for 3 couples transformed into an encounter with both historical tragedy and inexplicable phenomena that continues to defy conventional explanation. The group consisted of Marcus and Julia Whitman, both environmental scientists, David and Karen Chen, medical professionals, and Tyler and Amelia Rodriguez, documentary filmmakers working on a series about America's artificial lakes. They had selected Lake Lanier for its unique history and ecological significance. Created in the 1950s by flooding valley communities to construct Buford Dam, Lake Lanier submerged entire towns, displacing approximately 700 families and numerous businesses. More significant to the events that would unfold, the lake also covered several historical cemeteries, some of which were never properly relocated. The group arrived at a secluded peninsula campsite, accessible only by boat, approximately 3 miles from the nearest marina. Their location offered exceptional privacy, situated on a forested promontory that extended into one of the lake's deeper sections. Weather conditions were optimal, with clear skies and temperatures in the mid-80s during the day. The first concerning incident occurred while the group was setting up camp. Tyler, while hammering tent stakes, unearthed what appeared to be fragments of concrete foundation and weathered ceramic tiles. Clear evidence they were camping on what had once been a building site before the valley's inundation. Marcus, with his environmental science background, confirmed this wasn't unusual. The lake's fluctuating water levels frequently exposed remnants of the communities that had existed before the dam's construction. As the evening progressed, David and Karen, both experienced divers, decided to conduct a brief exploratory dive near their campsite. The lake water was unusually clear for midsummer, with visibility extending to approximately 15 feet. 40 minutes into their dive, at a depth of about 60 feet, they encountered what Karen later described as an entirely preserved street, a row of submerged buildings with intact walls, doorways, and even a small church steeple protruding from the sill. Most unsettling was their discovery of what appeared to be a cemetery at the end of this submerged street, rows of stone markers barely visible beneath layers of sedimentation and aquatic growth. According to David's dive log, they terminated their exploration when they observed what seemed to be recent disturbances in the silt around several grave markers, as though something had been emerging rather than descending. That evening around the campfire, David and Karen shared their discoveries with the group. Tyler, immediately recognizing the documentary potential, proposed a more extensive dive the following day with underwater filming equipment. However, as darkness enveloped the lake, the group became aware of unusual sounds emanating from the water, rhythmic splashing that seemed to circle their peninsula in a counterclockwise pattern, maintaining a consistent distance from shore. Marcus and Tyler, investigating with powerful flashlights, observed what they initially assumed was a large fish creating surface disturbances. However, the methodical nature of the movement and its perfect circularity around their entire campsite suggested a level of intentionality incompatible with typical fish behavior. For nearly 40 minutes, the splashing continued its precise orbit before abruptly ceasing. The group retired to their tents, slightly unnerved, but still rationalizing the experience as wildlife activity. At approximately 2:17 a.m., according to Julia's subsequently recovered journal, the entire group was awakened by what she described as the sound of footsteps, dozens of them moving through wet sand along the shoreline surrounding their campsite. The sounds created a distinct impression of multiple individuals emerging from the water and proceeding toward the forest edge before returning to the lake. Tyler activated recording equipment, but captured only the sounds of water lapping at the shore. The footsteps, clearly audible to all 6 campers, somehow failed to register on his sensitive microphones. When Marcus and Tyler cautiously investigated the shoreline with flashlights, they discovered a series of footprints leading from the water's edge toward their campsite before returning to the lake. Most disturbing was the impression quality of these tracks. As Tyler noted in his documentary notes, they appeared simultaneously fresh, yet decades old, distinct enough to show individual toe marks, but with a weathered, almost fossilized quality. The second day brought escalation. While Julia and Amelia prepared breakfast, they discovered their cooler had been opened and rearranged during the night, despite being secured with a bear-resistant lock, whose combination was known only to the group members. Inside, food items had been methodically sorted, meat separated from vegetables, beverages arranged by type, with a precision that eliminated animal interference as an explanation. More alarming was the discovery of numerous personal items from the group's tents, now placed at precise intervals along the shoreline. A watch, eyeglasses, Julia's journal, Tyler's camera lens cap, Karen's diving regulator, and other objects of no nutritional value that would exclude wildlife interest. Each item had been positioned exactly 7 feet from the water's edge and exactly 12 feet from adjacent items, creating a perfect perimeter around the camping area. Despite growing unease, the group proceeded with their planned activities. David, Karen, and Tyler conducted their planned documentary dive to the submerged settlement, bringing sophisticated underwater filming equipment. The footage they captured revealed the extent of the preserved town below. Streets laid out in a grid pattern, a small commercial district, with store frontiers still displaying weathered signage, and the previously observed cemetery now clearly visible in the improved lighting conditions. It was at the cemetery site that the dive took a disturbing turn. The previously noted disturbances in the silt had expanded significantly overnight, with multiple grave sites now exhibiting what David, a physician with forensic training, characterized as evidence consistent with upward rather than downward movement. More immediately concerning, the divers observed what appeared to be fresh footprints in the silt leading from these disturbed graves toward the shore nearest their campsite. The group's rational foundations began to erode when they reviewed the underwater footage that evening. Several sequences captured what underwater cinematographers call swimmer's shadows, humanoid shapes moving at the periphery of the frame. When analyzed frame by frame, these shadows displayed distinct characteristics inconsistent with fish, debris, or known aquatic wildlife. Most unsettling was a 5-second sequence where one such figure appeared to turn and face the camera directly, revealing what Tyler described in his notes as a face with features distorted by decomposition, yet somehow animated by conscious recognition. That night, the group implemented security measures, rotating watches, multiple light sources illuminating the shoreline, and a perimeter of fishing lines strung with small bells as a primitive alarm system. These precautions proved inadequate. At precisely 2:17 a.m., the exact time noted from the previous night, the lakes surrounding their peninsula began to exhibit a phenomenon Karen, with her medical background, described as peristaltic movement, rhythmic contractions and expansions of the water's surface, creating waves that moved toward shore in concentrated pulses. Simultaneously, the group's electronic devices began to malfunction, cameras cycling through their entire memory storage, displaying images in reverse chronological order. Cell phones, despite having no service, showing incoming calls from numbers consisting only of zeros, and flashlights fluctuating in brightness in a pattern that Marcus recognized as Morse code, spelling out what appeared to be dates from the early 1950s, the period when the valley was being evacuated for flooding. The group's planned 7-day excursion was abandoned after just 48 hours. As they hurriedly packed their campsite at first light, they discovered the most disturbing evidence yet. Their campfire from the previous evening, which had been fully extinguished before they retired, had been methodically reconstructed during the night. The ashes had been arranged to form what was unmistakably a map of the submerged town below, with their exact campsite location marked by a small pyramid of pebbles. The experiences might have been dismissed as an elaborate hoax, except for the compelling evidence the group retained. Tyler's underwater footage underwent analysis by marine biologists and photography experts who confirmed the anomalous figures were neither digital artifacts nor known aquatic species. Soil samples from the shoreline footprints contained microbial communities, typically requiring decades to develop, yet present in impressions less than 24 hours old. Most significantly, audio analysis of ambient recordings revealed ultra-low frequency sound patterns, matching those documented at other sites where structural materials have been subjected to extreme pressure, followed by sustained submersion. What one researcher termed the acoustic signature of architectural memory. Following the incident, Lake Lanier officials conducted a discreet investigation of the area. What they discovered has never been fully disclosed to the public, but lake management subsequently established a permanent ecological research exclusion zone around the peninsula, prohibiting camping, diving, or boat traffic within a half-mile radius of the site. The three couples have declined most interview requests, though Marcus and Julia did contribute to a geological survey publication where they noted that certain locations retain environmental and potentially psychological imprints of traumatic mass displacement. When these locations involve both human remains and the deliberate submersion of once vibrant communities, the resulting energetic anomalies may manifest in ways current scientific frameworks are inadequate to fully explain. Lake Lanier continues to have one of the highest accident and drowning rates of any U.S. recreational lake, with numerous unexplained disappearances concentrated in areas where pre-inundation cemeteries and settlements are known to exist beneath the surface. Local diving instructors now explicitly warn against night diving, particularly during periods when lake levels drop, to reveal previously submerged structures. In the summer of 2017, what began as a routine field study in Oregon's Mount Hood National Forest evolved into one of the most thoroughly documented cases of unexplained wilderness phenomena in recent scientific literature. The incident, which unfolded over 7 days in an isolated section of the forest, known locally as Whistling Ridge, would later become the subject of a classified Forest Service investigation and multiple academic papers in environmental psychology journals. The research team consisted of 4 graduate students from Pacific Northwest University's Department of Environmental Sciences: Dr. Eleanor Walsh, Team Lead, Forest Ecology; Michael Barrett, Wildlife Biology; Sophia Nakamura, Environmental Toxicology; and James Wilson, Geomorphology, accompanied by 2 undergraduate research assistants, Caitlin Henderson and Daniel Park. Their purpose was to conduct a comprehensive ecological survey of an old-growth forest stand that had remained largely untouched by human activity due to its remote location and challenging terrain. The team established their research camp in a small clearing approximately 12 miles from the nearest access road, requiring a full day's hike with equipment. Their location had been selected specifically for its isolation, allowing them to study forest processes with minimal human interference. The team had secured all necessary permits and had filed a detailed itinerary with both university administrators and Forest Service officials. The anomalous events began on their second night in the field. At approximately 10:15 p.m., all 6 researchers independently noted a distinct whistling sound emanating from the ridge above their campsite. The sound maintained a consistent 3-note pattern that repeated at precise 12-second intervals for approximately 20 minutes before ceasing. Dr. Walsh, who had extensive experience in the region, initially attributed the sound to wind moving through the distinctive rock formations that gave Whistling Ridge its name. However, when the pattern recurred at exactly the same time the following night, with identical tonal qualities, despite significantly different wind conditions, the team began documenting the phenomenon more systematically. Sophia set up audio recording equipment, while James used meteorological instruments to measure environmental conditions during the occurrences. On the 3rd night, the whistling began precisely on schedule, but exhibited a troubling evolution. Rather than remaining stationary at the ridgeline, the sound appeared to move in a circular pattern around the perimeter of their camp, completing exactly 7 rotations before stopping. The recording equipment captured this movement clearly, with audio analysis later confirming that the sound maintained consistent volume and clarity regardless of its apparent distance or the interfering vegetation, a physical impossibility that suggested the sound was being perceived rather than actually traveling through the air. The 4th day brought the first tangible evidence that something beyond an acoustic anomaly was occurring. While conducting transect sampling approximately 1 mile from camp, Caitlin and Daniel discovered an arrangement of stones that immediately struck them as unnatural. 27 rounded river stones, none of which were native to the immediate area's geology, had been placed in a perfect spiral pattern. At the center lay a small pile of organic material that, upon closer inspection, contained fragments of bone, feathers, and plant matter arranged in distinct layers. Dr. Walsh, drawing on her extensive knowledge of indigenous practices in the region, noted that the arrangement bore similarities to certain ceremonial structures documented in anthropological literature, though with significant differences that made attribution to known cultural traditions problematic. The discovery was photographed extensively, samples were collected, and GPS coordinates were recorded before the team returned to camp. That evening, the atmosphere within the research team shifted from scientific curiosity to growing concern when Michael, who had been reviewing site photographs on his laptop, discovered something none of them had observed in person. In the background of 3 separate images taken in different locations throughout the day, the same indistinct figure could be discerned partially obscured by vegetation. A bipedal shape with unusual proportions that appeared to be observing the researchers from a distance. The team implemented enhanced security measures, maintaining a constant watch rotation throughout the night, keeping all equipment within the immediate camp perimeter, and establishing pre-arranged signals and meeting points in case separation became necessary. Despite these precautions, the night brought further escalation. The whistling began at 10:15 p.m. as expected, but now incorporated new elements, additional tones that created dissonant harmonies and rhythmic variations that several team members noted seemed almost linguistic in structure. Most disturbing, the recording equipment failed to capture any of these new sonic elements, despite team members confirming with each other in real time that they were all hearing the same expanded patterns. Shortly after midnight, all equipment with batteries, headlamps, cameras, laptops, GPS units, simultaneously lost power despite having been recently charged. The team's satellite phone, their only communication link with the outside world, displayed a fully charged battery but failed to function. In the resulting darkness, illuminated only by their campfire, the researchers observed what James meticulously documented in his field notes as orchestrated bioluminescence, patterns of light moving among the trees that mimicked the movements of fireflies, but with precision coordination impossible in known insect behavior. By morning, the equipment had inexplicably returned to normal function, with batteries showing nearly full charges. The data recorded during the previous day's research activities, however, had been altered. Image files showed distinct chronological jumps, with timestamps indicating that all devices had continued operating during periods when team members were certain they had been powered down. Audio recordings contained segments of the researchers' own conversations that no one recalled having in proximity to the recording equipment. The 5th day brought the discovery that definitively transformed the expedition from scientific research to something far more unsettling. While collecting water samples from a small stream approximately half a mile from camp, Sophia and James found a field journal partially submerged near the bank. The journal contained detailed notes, sketches, and data tables documenting the same ecological phenomena the team had been studying, written in what was unmistakably Dr. Walsh's handwriting. The final entry was dated 2 weeks in the future. When confronted with the journal, Dr. Walsh confirmed it was identical to her current field journal in every detail. Same manufacturing details, same personalized modifications she had made to the cover, and handwriting she verified as her own. Yet her actual journal remained in her possession, with entries that matched the found copy exactly up to the current date, after which the discovered journal continued with detailed accounts of research activities, discoveries, and events that had not yet occurred. The Found Journal's final entry described the team's decision to depart from the research site ahead of schedule due to growing concerns about observational integrity and researcher safety. It detailed precisely how they would pack their equipment, which route they would take back to the trailhead, and even specific conversations that would occur during their departure. After extensive discussion, the team made the unanimous decision to terminate the expedition immediately, carefully documenting their findings and securing all evidence. As they prepared for departure on the morning of the 6th day, they discovered the most disturbing development yet. The stone spiral formation they had documented 2 days earlier had been meticulously reconstructed in the center of their camp overnight, with their own personal items integrated into the pattern. Caitlin's pendant, a page from Michael's personal journal, James's pocket knife, Sophia's hair tie, Daniel's compass, and a pressed flower specimen from Dr. Walsh's collection. Their departure proceeded with an efficiency born of shared unease. Following the exact route described in the Found Journal, they encountered each landmark and obstacle precisely as documented in its pages. Most unsettling were the conversations that spontaneously emerged among team members. Discussions that followed the exact wording described in the journal's future entries, often recognized as such by the speakers only after the words had been uttered. The team reached the trailhead by nightfall, as predicted in the journal, where they were met by Forest Service officials. The officials, responding to an automated distress signal allegedly triggered by the team's satellite phone 24 hours earlier, appeared confused when informed that the phone had been non-functional and no distress call had been intentionally placed. The aftermath of the Whistling Ridge incident has been characterized by institutional caution and academic controversy. The research team submitted a comprehensive report to both their university and the Forest Service, complete with audio recordings, photographs, environmental samples, and detailed personal accounts. The Forest Service subsequently designated a research restriction zone encompassing Whistling Ridge, ostensibly for habitat protection, but with unusually stringent access limitations. Multiple equipment manufacturers examined the team's devices, finding no technical explanations for the synchronized power failures or data anomalies. Audio analysis confirmed that the recorded whistling contained frequency patterns not produced by any known wildlife species in the region, while also exhibiting acoustic properties inconsistent with environmental sound propagation. Perhaps most significant was the analysis of the mysterious Found Journal. Forensic examination confirmed the paper, binding, and ink matched Dr. Walsh's actual journal exactly, while handwriting analysis verified the entries as consistent with her writing patterns without evidence of forgery. Carbon dating, however, produced wildly inconsistent results across different pages, with some sections appearing to contain cellulose compounds with molecular structures that, according to one laboratory report, do not conform to currently understood laws of organic chemistry. The 6 researchers have continued their academic careers, but have declined further fieldwork in the Whistling Ridge area. In a rare interview granted to a scientific journal, Dr. Walsh offered perhaps the most insightful perspective on their experience. As environmental scientists, we're trained to observe natural systems through the lens of established physical laws. What we encountered at Whistling Ridge suggests there may be ecological interactions operating according to principles we haven't yet formulated. The most scientifically responsible position isn't to dismiss these anomalies, but to recognize them as opportunities to expand our understanding of natural systems beyond current paradigms. The Mount Hood National Forest remains open to recreational camping with Whistling Ridge now designated as a restricted research area. Local guides and longtime Forest Service employees have acknowledged a long-standing tradition of avoiding that particular section of forest after dark, referencing generations of similar accounts that have largely remained within oral tradition rather than official documentation. In April 2018, what began as a meticulously planned caving and camping expedition in Kentucky's Mammoth Cave National Park system became a life-altering ordeal for 5 experienced spelunkers. The incident, which has since been the subject of multiple National Park Service investigations and a classified report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, stands as one of the most perplexing cases of rapid-onset environmental psychosis ever documented. The expedition team consisted of Raymond Fuller, 38, expedition leader with over 200 documented cave dives, Dr. Elaine Marquez, 42, geologist specializing in karst formations, Kyle Brennan, 35, professional nature photographer, Tessa Williams, 29, advanced wilderness paramedic, and Cameron Lee, 31, environmental engineer. All 5 were certified in advanced cave navigation, wilderness first aid, and survival techniques. The group had collectively explored challenging cave systems across North America, Europe, and Southeast Asia without incident. Their objective was to document and map a recently discovered extension of the Whispering Caverns, a lesser-known subsystem within the vast Mammoth Cave network. This extension had been identified during routine Park Service survey work, but remained largely unexplored due to its remote location and challenging access points. The expedition had secured all necessary permits and was in compliance with National Park Service regulations, including detailed itinerary filing and emergency communication protocols. The team established a primary base camp near the cave entrance and a secondary camp within the cave itself, approximately 800 feet from the entrance, in a large chamber with a stable floor and adequate air circulation. This dual camp strategy allowed them to conduct extended exploration deeper into the system while maintaining a secure retreat point. Their equipment was state-of-the-art, including redundant lighting systems, advanced communication devices, and comprehensive mapping technology. For the first 2 days, the expedition proceeded according to plan. The team mapped approximately 1,200 feet of previously undocumented passages, collected geological samples, and documented several unique formations. Raymond's expedition log, later recovered, noted excellent team dynamics and described the cave system as remarkably pristine with unusual acoustic properties. Elaine's geological notes indicated particular interest in what she termed non-standard speleothems, featuring atypical crystalline structures and coloration. The first anomaly occurred on the evening of the 3rd day. While reviewing photographic data at the underground camp, Kyle discovered something none of the team members had noticed during their exploration. In the background of several images taken in a narrow passage approximately 1,500 feet from the entrance, distinct handprints were visible in the clay walls, handprints that appeared significantly smaller than an adult human's and displayed anatomical proportions inconsistent with typical human morphology. The team initially hypothesized that these might be evidence of prehistoric human activity or perhaps modern hoaxes from previous visitors, though the latter seemed unlikely given the challenging access and pristine condition of the passages. Elaine collected samples from these impressions for later analysis, while Kyle implemented specialized photography techniques to document them more thoroughly. That night, all 5 team members reported difficulty sleeping due to what Raymond described in his log as persistent vocalizations from deeper within the system. These sounds, initially attributed to air movement through narrow passages, a common phenomenon in extensive cave systems often called cave breathing, exhibited characteristics that increasingly concerned the team. Rather than the random fluctuations typical of natural air movement, the sounds displayed rhythmic patterns with distinct tonal variations that several team members noted seemed almost linguistic in structure. The team's digital audio recorders, left running overnight as part of their standard documentation protocol, failed to capture these sounds, despite team members confirming they were clearly audible. This technical anomaly prompted Cameron to conduct a comprehensive equipment check, which revealed no malfunctions in the recording devices. On the fourth day, the expedition penetrated approximately 2,300 feet from the entrance, reaching a large chamber they designated Confluence Hall, due to multiple passages converging at this point. Here, they encountered the first phenomena that definitively exceeded conventional explanation. While conducting routine atmospheric measurements, Cameron's equipment registered sudden and dramatic fluctuations in air composition, oxygen levels briefly dropping to near fatal levels before returning to normal within seconds, without any physiological effects on team members who should have experienced significant respiratory distress from such variations. Simultaneously, Tessa, while collecting water samples from a small underground pool, observed what she initially thought was crystalline sediment at the water's edge. Closer examination revealed intricate geometric patterns that were actively forming and dissolving before her eyes, reminiscent of cellular automata or mathematical visualizations rather than natural crystallization processes. When she called other team members to observe, the phenomena ceased, leaving no physical evidence. That evening, the decision was made to relocate their underground camp to Confluence Hall to facilitate deeper exploration. As they transferred equipment, all 5 members experienced a synchronous episode of spatial disorientation, what Kyle later described as a complete inversion of dimensional perception, where vertical and horizontal orientations became temporarily indistinguishable, causing extreme vertigo. The episode lasted approximately 40 seconds and affected all team members simultaneously, despite their being in different locations throughout the passage. The 5th day marked a significant escalation. Upon awakening in their new camp location, the team discovered that all of their photographic and environmental data from the previous 2 days had been corrupted or erased from their devices. More disturbing was the discovery that Raymond's detailed expedition log now contained entries for days the team had not yet experienced, written in his handwriting, but describing events and discoveries that had not occurred. These entries detailed the team's exploration of passages they had not yet visited and documented findings they had not yet made. The future entries described the team's discovery of what Raymond had termed a transition zone, deeper within the cave system, where established physical constants began to demonstrate measurable variability. The log contained precise measurements, coordinates, and observations in Raymond's characteristic notation style, including his standard verification initials after particularly significant data points. The team conducted a thorough psychological assessment of all members, checking for signs of hypercapnia, elevated carbon dioxide in the blood, which can cause hallucinations in cave environments, or other environmental impairments. All members displayed normal vital signs and cognitive function, with no indication of physiological stress beyond mild fatigue, consistent with their activities. After extensive discussion, the team made the decision to investigate the coordinates specified in Raymond's anomalous log entries. Proceeding with extreme caution and maintaining constant communication, They navigated to a passage approximately 3,100 feet from the entrance, a narrow vertical shaft that descended nearly 200 feet before opening into a previously undocumented chamber. What they encountered in this chamber defied established geological understanding. According to statements later provided to park authorities, the chamber contained perfectly spherical formations suspended in midair, exhibiting no visible means of support. These spheres, ranging from baseball to basketball size, appeared to be composed of standard cave minerals, but arranged in configurations that violated known physical principles. When Cameron attempted to document these formations with specialized measuring equipment, his devices registered conflicting and impossible values, negative mass measurements and dimensional readings that fluctuated between different numerical systems. While examining these anomalies, all 5 team members simultaneously experienced what Elaine described as auditory hallucinations of extreme specificity. They each heard voices that they identified as belonging to themselves, but speaking words they had not yet said, describing observations they had not yet made. Most disturbing was the consistent report from all team members that these voices conveyed identical information despite each person believing they were experiencing an individual hallucination. The final anomaly, which prompted the team's emergency evacuation decision, occurred when Tessa separated from the group briefly to collect samples from a particularly unusual formation. Upon rejoining the team approximately 3 minutes later, according to her chronometer, she was informed that she had actually been absent for over 3 hours, during which the remaining team members had conducted a progressive search for her through adjacent passages. During her subjective 3 minutes, Tessa had maintained constant visual contact with at least one team member at all times, from her perspective. This temporal discrepancy, experienced by a team member with no previous psychiatric history and witnessed by 4 other experienced professionals, triggered the expedition's emergency protocols. The team immediately began their retreat to the surface, navigating according to their established markers without further exploration. The ascent to the surface revealed one final inexplicable circumstance. The journey that had taken nearly 3 days to carefully map and navigate from the entrance required only 4 hours to retrace, despite the team maintaining a deliberately measured pace and documenting their progress at regular intervals. According to their tracking data, they appeared to have traversed identical passages in a fraction of the time, without any apparent explanation for the discrepancy. Upon reaching the surface, the team discovered that their emergency contact at the National Park Service had already initiated search protocols, having received no communication from the expedition for nearly 24 hours beyond their scheduled check-in, despite the team maintaining their regular communication schedule according to their logs and equipment timestamps. In the aftermath of the expedition, all 5 members underwent extensive medical and psychological evaluation. No physical abnormalities were detected beyond elevated levels of specific stress hormones consistent with their reported experiences. Psychological assessments revealed no evidence of pre-existing conditions or shared delusional disorders that might explain their collective experiences. Analysis of the physical samples and documentation they retrieved yielded further anomalies. Geological specimens from the deeper sections displayed crystalline structures that reorganized themselves when viewed under different lighting conditions. Photographic evidence showed significant deterioration through a progressive smearing effect, unlike typical digital corruption. Audio recordings contained segments of complete silence in patterns that, when visualized as waveforms, created recognizable geometric shapes. The Whispering Caverns extension has since been designated a restricted research area by the National Park Service, with access limited to specialized scientific teams with advanced monitoring equipment. The 5 expedition members have largely withdrawn from public caving activities, though several have engaged in controlled research collaborations with universities studying consciousness and perception in enclosed environments. Dr. Marquez, in her single public statement about the incident, perhaps best summarized their collective experience. We entered the Earth as scientists with a fundamental trust in the consistency of physical reality. What we encountered suggests that this consistency may be more negotiable than our current frameworks can accommodate. The most scientifically responsible conclusion is not that we experienced hallucinations, but that we briefly inhabited a space where the rules governing reality demonstrate more flexibility than our current understanding allows for. In September 2019, a camping trip to Echo Lake in Maine's Acadia National Park became the focus of an extensive multi-agency investigation that remains partially classified to this day. What began as a team-building retreat for 7 employees of Meridian Biotechnologies transformed into an incident that would later be scrutinized by the CDC, FEMA, and specialized research divisions of the Department of Interior. The group consisted of Dr. Andrew Keene, 38, Research Director, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, 35, Senior Biochemist, Dr. Priya Sharma, 42, Environmental Toxicologist, Mark Davis, 31, Research Assistant, Jennifer Chen, 29, Laboratory Technician, Robert Lawson, 44, Security and Logistics Coordinator, and Thomas Wright, 36, Equipment Specialist. Though primarily scientists rather than outdoor enthusiasts, the group had selected Echo Lake for its accessibility, while still offering genuine wilderness experiences appropriate for moderately experienced campers. Echo Lake, despite its proximity to popular tourist areas, features several remote camping areas on its northern shore that remain relatively isolated, particularly in the post-summer season. The Meridian team had secured the necessary permits for a 5-day stay at one such site, accessible only by a 2-mile hiking trail or by canoe across the lake. The first indication of unusual circumstances came on their second evening. The weather forecast had predicted clear conditions, but as twilight descended, an unusual fog began forming over the lake. Robert, who had previously served in naval operations with weather monitoring experience, noted several atypical characteristics of the phenomenon. Rather than forming in the typical layered pattern of temperature-based condensation, the fog appeared to coalesce around specific points above the water surface before expanding outward in perfectly symmetrical patterns. Dr. Mitchell, utilizing the group's meteorological equipment brought along to monitor conditions for outdoor experiments, recorded several anomalous readings. The fog exhibited a temperature approximately 12 degrees higher than the surrounding air, contained unusual particulate concentrations, and demonstrated electromagnetic properties inconsistent with standard water vapor. As darkness fell completely, the fog expanded from the lake toward their campsite, with what multiple team members independently described as deliberate directionality. Rather than drifting with prevailing air currents, the fog moved directly toward their camp, regardless of wind conditions, eventually enveloping their entire site in a dense white cloud that reduced visibility to less than 3 feet. It was at this point that the first physiological effects manifested. Jennifer was the first to report what she described as oral hallucinations, distinct voices that seemed to emanate from within the fog itself. The voices were reportedly speaking what sounded like coherent sentences, but in no recognizable language. Within 20 minutes, all 7 team members confirmed experiencing the same phenomenon, though with significant differences in how they perceived the voice's emotional tenor. with descriptions ranging from plaintive and beseeching to coldly analytical. Dr. Keene, following established protocols for potential environmental toxin exposure, instructed everyone to don the emergency respirators they had brought as standard field safety equipment. This precaution proved ineffective against the progressing symptoms. Within the hour, team members began experiencing highly specific visual phenomena. Geometric patterns overlaid on their normal vision, peripheral movement that disappeared when directly observed, and most disturbingly, what Mark described in his later statement as temporary substitutions, moments when team members' appearances briefly altered to show entirely different faces before returning to normal. As a precautionary measure, the group relocated to their tents, implementing a buddy system to ensure no one was alone at any point. Dr. Sharma maintained a scientific log throughout the night, documenting the progression of symptoms with remarkable clarity, despite her own experiencing increasing perceptual distortions. Her notes, later recovered, showed a methodical scientist's approach to what was happening. Working hypothesis: neurotoxic agent with hallucinogenic properties, potentially biological in origin, given its apparent organized behavior. Alternative hypothesis: mass psychogenic illness triggered by environmental factors unique to this location. By approximately 3 a.m., the fog had penetrated the interior of their tents, despite all conventional weather barriers. Robert's security training prompted an emergency evacuation decision, and the group prepared to depart immediately, despite the darkness. It was during these preparations that they discovered the most alarming development. All trails leading away from their campsite now appeared to loop back to the lake regardless of which direction they took. Thomas and Robert, attempting to navigate by compass, discovered that their instruments showed wildly fluctuating readings, with magnetic north appearing to rotate around their position in a clockwise pattern that completed a full 360-degree cycle every 7 minutes. GPS devices similarly malfunctioned, showing their location as simultaneously in multiple places within a 50-mile radius. The group's decision to remain at their campsite until daylight proved consequential. Around 4:15 a.m., Jennifer observed what appeared to be human figures moving within the fog, approximately 20 yards from their camp. Using their high-powered research flashlights, the group illuminated multiple humanoid shapes that, according to all 7 testimonies, exhibited unusual movement patterns described as jerky but purposeful, and achieving normal human locomotion through clearly non-standard mechanical sequences. Dr. Keene's attempt to communicate with these figures yielded the incident's most disturbing development. When he called out, all the shapes simultaneously ceased movement, oriented toward the group, and began advancing toward the campsite with synchronous precision. Robert's emergency training took precedence at this point, and he discharged a warning shot from the sidearm he was authorized to carry as the team's security coordinator. The gunshot had an unexpected effect on the phenomenon. The sound appeared to propagate through the fog in visible concentric waves of disturbance, and the advancing figures immediately dissipated into vapor. More significantly, the entire fog bank receded from the campsite at an accelerated rate, returning to the lake surface within minutes. As dawn broke, the group discovered peculiar residue covering all surfaces in their campsite, a thin, oily substance that evaporated rapidly when exposed to direct sunlight, leaving no trace for later analysis. Their electronic equipment, particularly anything with storage capability, had been compromised. Camera memory cards contained only corrupted images displaying uniform mathematical patterns rather than the photos and videos they had recorded. Audio recordings captured during the night contained only a continuous tone that, when analyzed through spectrum analysis, revealed frequency patterns identical to specialized research signals used in Meridian's laboratories for protein structure communication. Most alarmingly, when the group checked their communications devices as sunlight strengthened, they discovered that despite having no service during the incident, multiple text messages and emails had been sent from their devices during the night. These communications, addressed to colleagues at Meridian Biotechnologies, contained complex biochemical formulas and molecular diagrams relating to ongoing research projects, information transmitted with significant advancements beyond the current state of their research. The group immediately initiated their emergency protocols, contacting park authorities and their company's incident response team. Their report triggered a rapid response from multiple federal agencies due to both the unusual nature of their experience and Meridian's contracts with government research divisions. The official investigation that followed yielded troubling findings. Environmental sampling revealed no conventional explanation for the fog or its effects. However, specialized equipment detected residual patterns of compounds that matched unrelated research Meridian had been conducting on bioluminescent communication systems in marine organisms. Research files that had been stored on company servers with no physical presence at the campsite. Medical examination of the team members showed no lasting physiological damage, but all 7 exhibited identical anomalies in their neurochemistry. Elevated levels of specific neurotransmitters associated with information processing and pattern recognition, and the presence of a previously unidentified protein in their cerebrospinal fluid that appeared to facilitate enhanced neural connectivity in the visual cortex. Perhaps most significant was the discovery that similar incidents had occurred at Echo Lake approximately every 7 years since 1984. Though previous occurrences had involved less scientifically trained observers and had consequently been attributed to conventional explanations ranging from hallucinogenic mushroom exposure to carbon monoxide poisoning from improper camping equipment. The case took a further unusual turn when, 3 weeks after the incident, the advanced biochemical formulas transmitted from the team's devices during the exposure proved to be viable approaches to significant research problems Meridian had been attempting to solve for years. Several of these approaches have since been implemented in their research protocols, yielding results that outside evaluators have described as unexpectedly elegant solutions that seem to originate from a novel perspective on molecular communication. Dr. Sharma, in her confidential debriefing with government researchers, proposed what has become the leading theory regarding the Echo Lake phenomenon. What we experienced appears to be a form of information exchange initiated by an unknown biological system that utilizes fog as both a medium for consciousness and a mechanism for neurotransmitter delivery. The system apparently possesses the capability to access information stored digitally and biologically, process it according to parameters we don't yet understand, and return it in modified form. The regular 7-year cycle suggests a reproductive or life cycle component to the phenomenon. Echo Lake remains open to recreational use, but since 2020, the National Park Service has implemented a temporary weather closure protocol that specifically evacuates campers whenever fog conditions develop. Environmental monitoring equipment now maintains constant surveillance of the lake's northern shore, with data feeds transmitted directly to a specialized research division within the Department of Interior. The 7 members of the Meridian team have continued their professional work, though with reported significant changes in their research approaches and cognitive processes. In particular, Dr. Mitchell's subsequent work in biochemical communication systems has demonstrated what peer reviewers have termed intuitive leaps that bypass conventional methodological steps. When questioned about the source of her insights during a closed academic symposium, her response was both cryptic and revealing. Some knowledge arrives as an echo of information you haven't yet discovered. Park rangers now briefed on the case file routinely advise campers in the Acadia region to immediately relocate if they observe fog that moves against the wind or emanates unusual light patterns. The standard explanation provided to the public references unusual microclimatic conditions that can cause disorientation, with no mention of the more complex phenomenon documented in the classified sections of the Echo Lake Incident Report.